Part 23. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 222. The state of being able to influence the airflow with one's aura. It is also the top level that can only be achieved when one's personality is unified during Palash's heyday. Andrila and Nightmare stood together, looking at Garen's overwhelming violent energy, and murmured explanations in a low voice. This is the strongest level in the legend of a fighter. In ancient times, such a person was called the King of the Century. Garen. He finally reached this level. King of the Century. Nightmare looked up at the white gold pillar of air, with an irrepressible shock on his face. This kind of aura was as boundless as the ocean. With just a little contact, he felt a vast and boundless artistic conception rushing towards his face. As if he wants people to worship him. It turns out that martial arts can really reach this point. He originally didn't believe how high martial arts could reach simply. With the current rapid development of firearms, the decline of martial arts is completely inevitable. But now Galleon's explosion has allowed him to truly see the end of this road. The night sky seemed to be illuminated by a white gold energy, and the white light penetrated the fog, shining on the island like real sunlight. It's not a real light, it's just a neurological illusion caused by seeing people feeling aura. Everyone looked at the two auras above the island in shock. That was the rumored level of spirit condensation, the level known as the King of the Century. The surrounding groups of people from other forces kept moving back to avoid being covered by the platinum aura. After retreating several hundred meters, he finally left the coverage area of Chi. Within the scope of the spirit, as long as Garen is willing, he will immediately suffer the same results as those five masters. Being locked into a cage-like situation. Garen withdrew his gaze and looked around. The five masters were temporarily suppressed and could not come out at all. He waved his hand, and the platinum energy suddenly recovered, condensing into a huge platinum statue behind him. At the same time, the statue suddenly stretched out its hands and grabbed the Clown King. The huge platinum palm brought violent airflow to hold the Clown King. No, the Clown King screamed, and with a bang, a thick blue mist erupted, submerging the giant platinum hand in it. Everywhere covered by the fog, thick layers of blue ice condensed, which was very strange. The grass between some stone crevices was affected and quickly turned into a pool of blue liquid. Boom! Another large ball of flame suddenly exploded from the blue mist. The giant hand disappeared, the mist and flames quickly disappeared, leaving only a ball of minced meat residue where the Clown King was. Garen frowned slightly. A complete explosion of platinum energy can indeed suppress the entire audience, but this explosion cannot last long and consumes a lot of energy and energy. As soon as the spirit was put away, the other four breaths rushed towards him fiercely. The Rite of Glory and the Wolf Clan Bediger rushed forward. One of them was holding a knife, and the other's claws were glowing red. A violent surge of air surged in the air. The giant whales and black wolves formed by their respective styles also bit into the platinum statue wildly and ferociously. At the same time, two unknown people rushed from behind, carrying the same huge aura and strong wind. Garen snorted coldly and ignored it. Idle. All things are flowing, he crossed his arms and faced the two people in front of him. Invisible air currents shook from his side. The roar of giant elephants could be heard faintly in the air. Boom! His arms and claws collided together, making a loud noise that made his teeth tingle. A large amount of platinum energy broke through the power of glory and the energy of the leader of the Wolf Clan, like a sharp knife piercing straight into it. The two men vomited blood and retreated wildly, their complexions quickly turning from white to red. Two muffled sounds were heard from behind Garen at the same time. The blow shocked him slightly. He didn't care at all and jumped forward. Snapped. His hands were like claws, and he grabbed the wolf leader's throat. His platinum gold aura broke all his subsequent resistance in the blink of an eye. Although it was only a moment, it was enough. Click. The throat bones were lightly crushed. Bet tightened her grip on her throat, retreated and fell to her knees. Garen's expression remained unchanged, and his right palm glowed like ruby. With a backhand, he met the sneak attack of Palasha. His left palm struck the shoulder of Gloriquan like lightning. This time, he also took advantage of the moment when his courage was broken and he fell into temporary paralysis to take action. Bang 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 bang. A palm print was placed on the shoulder of Gloriquan, but 4 consecutive crashing sounds were heard. With every sound, Gloriquan's shoulders sunk down a level. By the 4th sound, the entire left side of his body was completely smashed. He finally took a few steps back in a daze, his eyes quickly lost their luster, and he fell to the ground. "Brother," a sad and angry roar came from behind Garen. Garen looked indifferent, turned around quickly, and struck out with a palm. The front is pressed against a tuning fork-like spike. Clang! The tuning fork trembled violently, and the spikes and palms were in a stalemate with each other. General Weissman in front of him looked crazy, and his skin was as red as a cooked shrimp. It was obvious that he had used some secret method to burst out his strongest strength in a short time. Garen was about to escape and fall back. Suddenly, a huge force came from behind, pushing him to the spot. He turned his head slightly and looked back. Palasha was biting his beard and put a palm on his back with a calm expression. "It's over," a sharp voice suddenly came from above. Garen suddenly raised his head and his pupils shrank. A colorful figure suddenly dropped down from above. "It's the Clown King." He stabbed straight down with his rune sword. Fragments of black light danced on the sharp tip of the rune sword. It was this bit of black light that gave Garen an extremely dangerous and terrifying feeling. From the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw something tied to the hilt of the rune sword. That was actually a bundle of purple gunpowder. At the same time, another general and the leader of the demon hunters, Elizare, also rushed over at the same time. One of them held a sword and the other raised a gun, almost without any pause. "Help!" Andrila and Nightmare were startled at the same time and rushed over quickly. But it was obviously too late. Garen's raised face could already feel the sharp tip of the rune sword piercing his forehead and between his eyebrows. Suddenly a faint smile appeared on his face. "Open your mouth and spit." Clang! A ray of white energy rose into the sky and hit the middle of the rune sword. The blade of the sword broke in response, and the tip of the sword flew out from the side, passed through the forehead of General Wiseman in front, and plunged into a black stone statue with a hiss. "Bring out a bunch of bright red blood flowers." The smile on the Clown King's face froze instantly. He suddenly recalled the scene where he showed the rune sword to Garen before, and his body fell involuntarily with gravity. "East King's hand." Garen roared, and an invisible airflow suddenly appeared all over his body. Palasha behind him was knocked back more than 10 steps. Tear. The Clown King's body was torn apart by Garen's hands and scattered on the black rocky ground. Not even a single intact bone could be found, all were torn into pieces of flesh and blood by the violent earthquake. In an instant, everyone in the audience stopped moving. Andrila and Nightmare, who were coming in a hurry, also stopped and felt a little nauseous looking at the flesh, blood, and bones covered on the ground. Looking at Garen again, it was like meeting him for the first time all over again. "I thought I was no worse than him, but I didn't expect." Nightmare bit her lip and said unwillingly. "This is the strongest state of martial arts. It's too exaggerated." Andrila was completely speechless, but the joints of her hand holding the hilt of the sword turned white. "Woo! Woo! Woo!" The mournful howls of wolves kept coming from the distance. It was the people of the wolf tribe who were grieving for the death of their leader. They did not rush forward, but retreated in 2s and 3s. Palasha leaned against the stone statue and looked at Galen calmly, with a hint of twilight in his eyes. He glanced at everyone around him. Elizare and General Weissman, who had just rushed over, stopped at this time and stood there, not daring to come again. All the other masters were completely killed at that moment. The Right of Glory and another general, as well as the Wolf Bediga, the Clown King. The deaths of the 4 people only resulted in a small scar on Garen's forehead. I thought you had just entered this realm and were not stable. It seems I was wrong. He suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. There are 2 keys. How about 1 each? There is no need to fight anymore. He looked at Andrilla and Nightmare. You 2 over there shouldn't have any intention of fighting for the key, right? Garen looked at him calmly. The old man's expression hadn't changed much from the beginning to now. It was obvious that he still had his trump card. Just now, he and the others besieged him, but he still didn't fully show his true strength. Take my 3 palms. If you are still alive, I can pretend that the siege just now never happened. He suddenly spoke. Palasha was not surprised at all and just took a deep breath. His expression became more serious than ever. 3 palms. That's arrogant. But with your current strength, you are qualified to say such a thing. I'll take it. He originally planned to use all the strong men here to besiege Garen. Even if he couldn't kill him, he could seriously injure him with less effort. Unexpectedly, it forced out Garen's terrifying strength. Reaching this extreme level of martial arts is already a different kind of qualitative change. He is not qualified to contact the strong men at this level, and even hurting Garen is a miracle. Palasha's thoughts flowed and he slowly stood up with his feet in a figure 8. I didn't expect that the trump card originally prepared for Xianfran had to be used on you in advance. He held out 3 fingers, thumb, index finger, and middle finger. 3 fingers were pressed firmly on the center of the eyebrows and both temples. Snapped. After a small sound, Palasha put down his hand again, and a huge amount of pure white spirit exploded around him. The large amount of spirit rippled and impacted like sea water, and soon condensed into a huge white bird. Miles. The giant bird made a strange chirping sound, and in terms of height, it was actually equal to the platinum statue of Garan. Palasha's eyes turned completely white, with no pupils visible. The clothes on his body were torn apart by the rapidly expanding muscles, and his height suddenly increased from 1.8 meters to more than 2 meters. His entire body showed a streamlined shape like a golden ratio. Call. He exhaled slowly, and 2 thick streams of white air came out of his nostrils, hitting the ground and making 2 small craters. Have the 3 personalities merged into one, Garen finally became serious. Seeing that Palasha's courage can actually reach his own height, it is obvious that he is now qualified to compete with him head-on. To be able to practice a mere assassination fist to such a high level. Palasha, you are the well-deserved number 1, Garen put one hand in front of the claw, the other hand behind his fist and raised his head to the sky, and his feet were in a lunge. It was as if the whole person was carrying a huge object of extremely heavy weight. Take my first palm. Garen rushed forward silently, and the fists of the platinum statue turned into white airflow, wrapped around his arms, and 2 platinum spikes shot out from the front of the palms. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 223. Snapped. His right palm gently collided with Palasha's raised palms. There were no violent explosions, nor was there any overwhelming and terrifying impact. It's just that 2 aura spikes shot out like poisonous snakes, and then shot back, as if everything was still the same. Garen also shot back with electricity and landed in an open space 10 meters away. Second palm. Without stopping at all, he rushed out again. Exactly the same as the previous palm, he met Palasha again lightly. Shape-cut fingers, Palasha roared, and his 10 fingers touched Garen's palm like raindrops. The moment each finger was touched, a trace of blue-gray flashed. After the 2 separated again, neither said a word. The last palm, Garen leaned forward, and the white gold statue suddenly merged with him. The edges of the entire body seemed to glow with white gold light. Nanchuang Fist. He lightly jumped in front of Palasha, and silently printed both palms at the same time. Boom! In an instant, countless white gold air currents burst out around Garen. The energy and air currents were mixed together, turning into countless sharp knives that stabbed Palasha from all directions at the same time. Bang! Thump thump thump! Palasha took 10 steps back. Every step left deep footprints on the ground. Garen closed his fist and stood up. Let's go! The flush on Garen's face disappeared in a flash, and he walked towards Andrilla and Nightmare. What about him? Nightmare looked at Palasha in confusion. However, Andrilla pulled up his clothes and said no more. The three of them put away the two black key-shaped stones, and were led by Tali Mercury and others who had already come over to wait for them, and headed towards the other side of the stone forest. Go to a clean place. Palasha stood quietly, looking at his hands with a wry smile. In fact, when he used this state, the result was already determined. In the final analysis, I just don't want to be lonely. He shook his head and smiled. The body suddenly exploded with a series of explosions. Bang 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 bang. It was as if a series of firecrackers suddenly lit up inside. His skin and muscles began to change from plump to shriveled, as if they had been dried for countless years in an instant. The originally rosy face quickly dried up at a speed visible to the naked eye, like the bark of a 1,000-year-old tree. The tall figure also quickly shrank and became shorter, and the whole person changed from a strong and fierce state to a miserable state like a mummy in the blink of an eye. He slowly leaned against a broken stone statue and looked across the grey clouds, as if he had seen his most glorious years. Suddenly, Xianflan's crazy face appeared in front of his eyes. He was startled for a moment, then understood. It turns out that I was already defeated at that time. A breeze blew by, and there was no one around the stone statue. Only a piece of clothing fell on a pile of grey-white sand. Next to another largest stone statue in the southern region. It has the same human shape as the previous central stone statue. There are two such stone statues in the entire southern region. Everyone can open the entrance to the ruins with a key. When the entrance is opened, everyone can enter. It's just that only the person holding the key is actually entitled to use the black smoke pot. The fog is thick and time is passing. The fog gradually changed from grey to black, then from black to grey, and then from grey to white completely. Garen was sitting cross-legged in the forest of stone statues with his eyes closed. The final burst of Palasha caused a vertical line-shaped wound on his chin. The natural healing ability of the divine image skill quickly healed the wound, leaving only a thin red line. After the three personalities merged into one, every move of Palasha was equivalent to the power of the secret technique. If he didn't notice it for a moment, he also suffered some internal injuries. The god statue technique, which is so perverted and legendary that it is a magic skill, was actually injured by Palasha after it was completed. This is a huge difference from the state where it was okay to resist Palasha's attack at the beginning. It's a pity that there is one less opponent in the world at Garen's level. There were too few people who could really catch his eye. But this time on the Smoke Island, so many martial arts masters died at once. Suddenly there was a sound of footsteps and voices in the distant mist. Garen slowly opened his eyes and saw Nightmare and Andrilla leading Tali, Quicksilver and Miss Sillin. Bai Ying was also among them, looking extremely embarrassed. The group also included two boys and girls who were asleep. Found it, Garen stood up. Is your injury okay? Nightmare suddenly showed interest when he saw Garen getting up. He came over and stretched out his scallion fingers to gently tap Garen's chest. Looking at how fierce you were just now, do you want to play some interesting games with your sister? I like you who are so fierce. Garen looked at Andrilla with a dark look on his face as he quickly pulled Nightmare away. Even now, it is difficult for him to get used to some of the heavy-flavored ideas that Nightmare pops up from time to time. Okay, stop making trouble. How much time does it take until the ruins are opened? Tali Mercury looked at his watch. There are still 20 minutes. Then you want to come with us? Garen glanced at Mercury, Scylla, and others in the tower. Mercury shook his head. Sorry, my daughter and Bai Ying need a good rest. And the poison on my body is a bit troublesome. I wasn't careful enough, Garen said apologetically. You clearly warned me. It's nothing. Fortunately, I've seen this kind of poison before. It's not too bad, Talai. Mercury smiled calmly. Next, if you want to get the right to use the black smoke pot, you have to face the Immortal Palace in the Northern Territory. If our strength is mixed in, it will only become a drag. So it's better not to go. Garen also understood that what he said was true and nodded. If you need any help when you go back, you can come to me at Bayun Gate. Thank you, Talai. Mercury nodded solemnly. Then Bai Ying and appraisal expert Yuk came up to express their thanks respectively. Miss Scylla took a step forward, rarely blushing. Thank you for saving me. You have a good figure. After saying this, she realized what she had said and quickly turned around and ran away. He is totally out of touch with his usual calm and elegant demeanor. You have a good figure, Nightmare repeated in a weird accent. I've taken a liking to you. Garen was completely speechless. Looking at his naked upper body, he didn't know what expression to use. After the detectives in the tower said goodbye, they gradually disappeared into the mist until the footsteps completely disappeared. Garen then turned around and looked at the huge stone statue more than 10 meters high in front of him. Let's start. Taking a deep breath, the three of them stood in front of the stone statue, forming a triangular formation, ready to deal with crises on all sides. Garen took out a black stone key from his trouser pocket, inserted it into a keyhole in the belly of the stone statue, and then twisted it slightly. The sound of rattling gears came from inside the stone statue, and the sound became louder and louder. From inside the stone statue, it quickly spread to the ground beneath the feet. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire stone forest floor began to make noises. Buzz. Suddenly, the entire southern island began to shake slightly, and subtle vibrations continued to spread from the ground. The three of Galen and the others looked at the black stone statue quietly. This black figure, with one hand raised and one hand on the ground, vibrated for a while, then stopped moving and simply stopped. The key to the Southern Territory has been unlocked, now it's up to the Northern Territory, Andrilla whispered. The time is correct. When the moon is full, it doesn't have to be at night. It's dusk now, and the moon should already be visible outside. Garen nodded. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a violent vibration from behind. On the ground in front of the three people, a black underground passage slowly opened. This is a square black stone passage. There are still many scratches and small pits on the walls inside, and there are even some white bones scattered on the ground. As soon as it was opened, a rotten smell suddenly poured out from inside. The three of them took back the keys without changing their expressions, and Garen glanced at the underground passage. In the last battle, only one person can win. Do you still want to go? Nightmare stepped back. I haven't lived enough yet. It's not my wish to fight to the death with Fairy Fran. My enemy is just the Firebird Mother. This level is out of my safety range. He curled his lips and said, to deal with freaks like you, low level a first level master can no longer play much of a role. I'd better not join in the fun. Andrilla gripped the hilt of the sword tightly. I'm with you. I'm here to find a breakthrough. There's no way to back down halfway. Have you really decided? Garen looked at him calmly. Bang. Nightmare held Andrilla, who had fainted. He has decided not to go. We will go back and wait for you first. I hope you have a good time. She waved goodbye to Garen with a bright smile. He picked up Andrilla and ran back, quickly disappearing into the thick fog. Garen's eyes twitched a few times and he didn't know what to say. He looked back at the dark passage in front of him. The shaking finally stopped. The island was quiet for a moment, then suddenly shook violently. Boom. Countless mist rolled and surged, converging between the north and the south, forming a large thin white cloud ring. All the smoke over the smoke island is swept away, revealing a clear dusk sky. Through the cloud ring, streaks of dim yellow and red sunlight shined on Garin through the stone forest. He looked up in the direction between north and south, where a huge black figure towered. The stone statue points to the sky with one hand and touches the ground with the other, smiling. There is a gap between the forehead and hair on the top of the head, just like the observation deck above the Statue of Liberty. The stone statue thousands of meters high stands in the center of the entire smoke island like a huge miracle of eternal existence. Garin touched the book pendant hanging on his chest and looked towards the middle of the top of the stone statue, where a tall figure stood faintly. Without any doubt, Garin knew that it was Xian Flan. He squeezed the pendant and jumped into the passage. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 224. Dang. 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 Bells rang slowly, coming from nowhere. Garin ran quickly in the dark passage, the road ahead quickly retreated, and the bones on the ground were crushed to pieces under his feet. Wipe off some powdered lime from the corner of the wall at the corner. Without any pause, he moved rapidly along the increasingly sloping passage. Snapped. Leather boots stopped, and Nightmare helped Andrilla look back. In the dim sunlight, the surface of the huge black stone statue seemed to be coated with a golden red halo. A heavy bell sounded from the top of the stone statue. It's really spectacular, Nightmare murmured. Garin, don't die. On the beach, Wiseman's black-chested and hairy general was waiting for the rapidly approaching warship. He and the demon hunter Eliza also turned back and looked at the towering black stone statue on the island. There were only a dozen demon hunters left, and Wiseman's soldiers were also few. The final battle is here. I didn't expect that the twilight bell has already sounded. It's really a battle worth looking forward to, the general said with emotion in his eyes. It's a pity that those two fools can never hear it again. I have long said that if you behave like them, your life will be short-lived. It's a pity that no one listens to me. Elizal touched the remaining scar on her face, which was left in the melee. The glorious power is dead. Aren't you sad at all, General Marrow? Sad? It would be better if you died. It just so happens that my family is the only one. When I go back, I will annex two big families. Hee, the black-chested and hairy general suddenly became happy, and suddenly he saw the warship approaching quickly. Hey! He rushed over and waved loudly. I'm here. Sweet little Sally. Northern Territory. Among the piles of bloody corpses, Mal, the assassin, supported the Arctic King. You idiot, are you okay? He slapped King Arctic twice hard. The latter slowly opened his eyes dizzily. Not dead yet. The main force is different. It's really thick-skinned, Mal sighed with emotion. When they besieged Immortal Palace, Immortal Fran, this Arctic King was the fastest, and of course he was also the most seriously injured. But he is worthy of being called a polar bear. His body is so strong that he hardly looks like a human being. He was hit 4 times in the front by Xian Flan, but he was still able to speak normally. The distant sound of bells came from high in the sky. It's the twilight bell, and the final battle has begun. Go and take a look. Mal looked up at the top of the huge black stone statue. I can't do it anymore. That guy is too perverted. He is seeking death by going there, the Arctic King replied feebly with a hum. It's okay, there is a pervert over there in the Southern Territory. We don't have to think about the black smoke pot, but no matter what, we can't let the people in the Immortal Palace take advantage of it, Mal said calmly. It's okay. No one who has been hit by my 3-day Arctic needle can survive for 3 days, the Arctic King sneered. The people in Asgard are not ordinary people, Mal emphasized. Well, okay, but I guarantee they won't have the energy to cause trouble for us now. Otherwise, can we still stand here safely? The Arctic King said unwillingly. I said you should just stay there and wait for their rescuers to pick you up. Why are you messing around? Mal shook his head. I have a reason to go. That's up to you. Arctic King hummed twice more, sat aside to rest alone, and began to check the injury. By the way, is my sister-in-law okay now? If you go and die, I have been coveting my sister-in-law for a long time, you know. Don't blame me for not being brotherly in the future. Mal had a dark look on his face. I said it's okay if you don't help. How can you take advantage of others' danger? Anyway, I don't care. You go quickly and don't forget to hum before you die. I will pick up my sister-in-law right away. The Arctic King was too lazy to pay attention to him. Mal applied medicine to the wound on his shoulder, tied it several times with the prepared bandage, and contracted the muscles to close the wound. There were fine beads of sweat on his forehead. Seeing the Arctic King staying alone with his eyes closed for cultivation, he shook his head speechlessly. He quietly turned around, jumped into the dark underground passage, and soon disappeared into the darkness. The Arctic King waited for a while and there was no sound, then he opened his eyes and took a look. I really went. Hi. Are you really tired of living? He looked back in the direction of the stone forest where there was a vague sound approaching. He hesitated and gritted his teeth. Shit. You're looking for death. You've made me miserable. He jumped into the dark passage and fell into the darkness several times. The fire sparrow mother leaned against the stone statue and looked quietly at the withered old man in pitch black in front of her. That guy ran away. The old man nodded. First he was hit by the Arctic needle for 3 days, and then he was hit by that guy's sneak attack. However, he was also stabbed by Xianflan's sword, and his injuries were no less severe than mine. He bowed slightly, and there was a ferocious sword wound on his lower abdomen. Still dripping blood. The Firebird mother looked up at the top of the huge stone statue. Xianflan is up, that guy is probably still hiding, waiting for an opportunity. I'm going back. What are you going to do? The old man was slightly surprised. You won't go up and help? The fire sparrow mother shook her head. I won't go, it's no longer necessary. The old man seemed to have thought of something, and his expression changed. Me and you together. The fire sparrow mother turned and walked towards the outside of the stone forest. Where he was standing, there was a pool of black and red blood. The old man in black followed closely. At the top of the stone statue, Immortal Fran's slender figure exuded a kind of eerie beauty. He held a red long sword upside down and looked quietly at Galen rushing up diagonally below. Along the stone steps of the passage, Garen gradually slowed down and looked up at Xianflan at the entrance of the passage. This man, who had been entangled with him from the beginning until now, was now wearing a dark silk robe. His pale skin and dark silk robe formed a sharp and dazzling contrast. The strong wind kept blowing, and Xianflan's long black hair was blowing to the left, and his black robe also made a rustling sound. Galen. He raised his right hand and opened his palm. A simple book necklace lay quietly in his palm. The stars of Yonjai are still with you, right? Garen stood still, holding the necklace on his chest with his hands. I clearly remember that you took it from me. What was taken away was not the necklace, but something else. Xianflan turned around and moved away from the entrance of the passage, walking to the edge of the platform. The strong wind blew his silky long hair flying. Garen slowly walked out of the passage. The passage was built inside the stone statue and went up diagonally to the top of the stone statue. The exit was on the platform above the head. On the top of the huge black stone statue, on the platform in the middle, Xianflan and Garen stood more than 10 meters apart. The entire black platform is hundreds of meters in diameter and oval in shape. It is surrounded by black stone guard rails, some of which have been damaged and fallen. There are detailed words and symbols engraved on the ground, walls, and ceilings. It seems to record the breath of another completely unfamiliar civilization. The distant bells kept coming from above the head, heavy and simple, with waves of faint echoes. The dim sunlight slanted in and fell at the feet of the two people, illuminating the entire gap between the platforms with golden red. Garen stared at Xianflan's back, walked around him to the guardrail, and looked down. Under the guardrail, a large white cloud ring is like a white garland, slowly rotating around the stone statue. Below the gap between the cloud rings, some small black dots were boarding the ships on the edge of the island one by one. Some ships are already leaving, and some are approaching. A trace of white cloud drifted in front of Garen. He stretched out his hand and gently grabbed the cloud. The cloud actually lingered around the back of his hand, like a white translucent ribbon. Garen's fingers are like the petals of a flower in bloom, turning naturally, softly and delicately, without a hint of rigidity. It actually prevented the clouds from drifting away at all. Bai Hua Yunqiao. Garen flicked his finger, tisk. The white cloud turned into a white thread and shot straight towards Xianflan. Quietly. The white line shot 1 meter in front of Xianflan and stopped suddenly. It was as if I had hit an invisible wall. Suddenly it exploded into fine white dots and disappeared. I still remember that the last time I saw you, you were far from this level. Xianflan had a strange smile on his face. Did you hear the bell ringing above your head? That's the twilight bell, which symbolizes the first stage of opening the black smoke pot. The first stage. Garen narrowed his eyes at him, waiting for his next words. Yes, there are 2 stages of black smoke pot. Xianflan held the guardrail with his hand, with a hint of memory in his eyes. The last time the black smoke pot was opened, it was when we heard the bell of the twilight bell. And the second stage has actually begun. It started from the moment we entered here. Oh! A layer of white gold slowly appeared on the surface of Garen's skin. That is, there is only one living person left here. Xianflan smiled casually and slowly waved the elf sword in his hand. Garen grabbed it with his right palm, absorbing the surrounding white clouds. White clouds were like white lines, and thousands of streams converged, gathering under his palm from all directions. A white cloud ball gathered in his palm. In terms of martial arts, besides you and me, who else in the world can be stronger than us? I didn't expect that you and I would have to compete here. He slowly walked towards Xianflan, and there seemed to be dragon-shaped tigers with every step he took. A sense of dominance. There was no sound, but it seemed as if the entire stone statue floor was shaking slightly. It has nothing to do with the black smoke pot. In fact, we have been waiting for this battle for a long time. Xianflan raised his sword and lightly touched the sword with his fingers, and the entire sword slowly bloomed with a blood-red light. He waved lightly, and a red line slowly floated out, cutting off the guardrail on the right side silently. Start right here and finish everything off. The tip of the elf sword tilted down, pointing towards the ground. It has nothing to do with the black tobacco pot. Garen suddenly raised his palm and pushed forward. Boom! A muffled thunder suddenly exploded in the sky. In the gap at the top of the stone statue, a large cloud of white gas and red light exploded, forming a red and white ring that slowly spread out. An inexplicable aura emanated from the top of the stone statue. This breath is transparent and invisible, rising straight into the sky. The sky quickly darkened, and countless dark clouds gathered, getting thicker and darker. The entire island began to shake slowly, and the gravel on the ground trembled and beat rapidly. A large amount of smoke spread out from the cracks in the ground, forming a large amount of white clouds, submerging the entire huge stone statue in it. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 225. The top of the statue. Garen and Silfran collided crazily. The palm of the hand and the sword blade faced each other head-on again and again, and each impact caused a large amount of white clouds and red light to fly away. It hit the surrounding walls and ground, constantly making holes of different sizes. Idol. East King's hand. A platinum statue suddenly appeared behind Garen, and instantly rushed into his body, becoming one. His hand was filled with unparalleled white gold light, stirring up countless clouds around him, and grabbed Xianflan's head with one palm. Laugh. Xianflan leaned back and his claws passed over him. In an instant, a red light lit up behind him, turning into countless red threads and stabbing Garen like a peacock spreading its wings. Red lines shot out from all directions, and all directions were covered for a while. Red moon shadow. Xianflan turned over and jumped away, pointing his finger at Garen, and suddenly countless red lines shot towards Garen. Everything is flowing, Garen's arms shook, and a violent transparent shock spread around his body, swinging out a large red line. Some remaining red lines stabbed him, making a hissing sound of metal cutting, leaving only a Daobian. He jumped forward and pounced on him again, the platinum gold energy completely condensing on him, without any waste. In his current state, if he faced any opponent other than Xianflan, and the opponent just looked at his figure, he might feel invincible and fearful. This is the highest state of martial arts in this world. The spirit and human body are combined into one, and the world is called, King of the Century. Similarly, Xianflan was also covered in black light at this time, like the eclipse sun, his aura and body tightly integrated into one. As the two men struggled wildly, the stone statue began to shake violently. Every encounter was like a bomb going off. Boom boom boom. At the entrance of the passage, a thin black figure was quietly rushing towards the top of the stone statue. Fight, fight, hee, when you both lose, be it the black smoke pot or the stars in the eternal night, everything will be mine. He couldn't suppress a low laugh. Violent vibrations continued to come from the stone walls of the passage, getting bigger and heavier. The opponent this time is much stronger than last time. Xianflan, you are finally going to be doomed. The black shadow stretched out his hand to touch the stone wall and sneered. Suddenly he felt something was wrong. Something's wrong, why is the vibration getting louder and louder? He suddenly stopped and looked back. A trace of red fire suddenly lit up in the dark passage. This is a bomb. His eyes suddenly opened wide. No no. Xianflan, you madman, he suddenly yelled crazily and rushed towards the front passage at full speed. Mal, the assassin's spear, stood quietly in front of the passage, looking at the passage in front that had been collapsed by explosives. I didn't know whether to advance or retreat for a while. Let's go back. The Arctic King stepped out behind him. Xianflan is a lunatic. In order to avoid interference in the decisive battle, he directly blew up the entire passage. Mal clenched his fists, turned around and left without saying a word. Where are you going? Arctic King looked at him doubtfully. Mal didn't answer, he just jumped up and accelerated, disappearing into the passage from whence he came. On the beach, Andrila sat cross-legged on the ground, with a long sword stuck on her side. He was raising his head blankly, looking at the gloomy and dark sky. Pieces of black petals slowly fell from the sky, flying one after another, falling on his sword, clothes, and even his face. At this time, heavy snow with black petals fell on the entire island. What's this? Andrila reached out and pinched a petal, but it shattered into black powder in his hands. Nightmare stood beside him, gently picking up the petals, trying to keep them intact. I don't know, but I have a bad feeling that we'd better get out of here as soon as possible. Let's wait until Garen comes back. Andrila was unmoved. Bang! Nightmare picked up the unconscious Andrila. If you tell me well but you don't listen and don't think about what level Galleon is, then you may not be able to survive even if he survives. She took one last look at the red and white clouds that were constantly exploding at the top of the stone statue. Garen, don't die. The island shook violently, and heavy black snow fell from the sky. Pieces of petals of snow completely covered the entire smoke island. Boom! A large ball of red flame suddenly exploded from the waist of the huge black stone statue, and a large amount of black smoke erupted. The entire giant stone statue began to tilt slowly. The upper body began to slowly tilt, break, and slide towards the island. There was also a rumble of thunder in the sky, as if weeping for the destruction of the giant stone statue. The top of the statue. Garen and Sanfran were face to face. The red line and white clouds between them turned into two shadows, and the specific shape was almost invisible. Countless red lines and white clouds collided with each other and turned into countless fine red and white fragments, sputtering and scattering towards both sides. The entire head of the stone statue began to shake violently as it tilted. The platform gap gradually slopes to the right. Boom! Garen's back hit a wall, and the wall was completely shattered with a bang, revealing a huge gap, and the empty black sky outside could be seen. The statue returns to its original state, his eyes suddenly opened, and his whole body suddenly expanded. His muscles bulged rapidly, and white gold lines slowly emerged on his upper body, forming strange and twisted natural pattern runes. Xianflan! Die! He roared, his hair stood up, his palms expanded like cattail fans, and he hit Xianflan from both sides. It was like a huge platinum giant grabbing a little dwarf with his palms together. The huge roaring sound waves combined with the vibration of his muscles all over his body actually formed a violent and strange vibration, causing his size to further expand to 2.5 meters tall. Before the move came, Xianflan felt a strong wind like a knife blowing towards his face, scraping blood marks on his face and skin. He felt two huge forces impacting his left and right ears at the same time, as if two giant elephants were charging violently at the same time, and he was stunned for a while. This power was more than twice as strong as the galleon's just now. Xianflan did not retreat but advanced, a calm smile suddenly appeared on his face. Squeak! As a fine sound rang out, countless black veins suddenly appeared on the skin of his face, like countless insects and earthworms, all gathered at the center of his eyebrows and squeezed into an eye-shaped piece of flesh. He stretched out his hand and touched the sword. In an instant, red light burst out. Wang Ji sword. He stabbed Garen directly in the face with his sword, but he didn't notice the two palms on his side. The elf sword was as dazzling as the setting sun, bursting out with an extremely intense and scorching light in an instant. Clang! A long bell rang. Garen's hands hit the air, and the sword light of Xianflan also pierced the air. The two people's positions are staggered. For a moment, it seemed as if all sounds were silenced. There is only the simple and distant sound of bells. Another bell rang. Clang! Garen's palm held the red sword, and the white airflow and the red light continued to collide. The entire gap was littered with scraped fragments of black stone. Xianflan was covered in black light and held a sword in both hands. The last bell rings. Clang! Xianflan abandoned his sword and changed his hand, pointed a finger at Garen's chest, and his fingertips penetrated Garen's skin deeply. Garen couldn't dodge and looked down at his chest. The two of them were completely frozen for a moment. Boom! A large ball of red flame exploded from the head of the stone statue. The ground of the platform was suddenly broken by a violent explosion, and countless black fragments were splashed and blackened in the flames. The figures of the two people were completely submerged. The entire upper body of the giant stone statue fell completely, hitting the island ground hard, splashing countless smoke and black ash. Boom! Where the stone statue fell, a column of black smoke shot straight into the sky, causing countless black petals and heavy snow to fly everywhere, becoming increasingly dense. The place of fall. Garen held Xianflan's arm tightly, and he began to vomit blood. They were all dark red, almost solidified blood clots. The two stood facing each other, and Sanfran's entire right arm passed through Garen's chest and stabbed out from behind. and Xianflan's own right arm and right shoulder were covered with bloody cracks, like fine cracks on porcelain, which seemed to be completely shattered with just the slightest touch. What's strange is that this crack is still slowly spreading towards his head. Blood gradually overflowed from Xianflan's body, but it was not very visible on the black windbreaker. Only the blood dripping at his feet could show his current injuries. Boom! There was a burst of thunder in the sky. The two of them were standing on the huge face and forehead of the stone statue. Below was a cliff of 10,000 feet, and at the bottom was dazzling red magma. A large amount of magma is constantly splashing and gushing, and it is slowly but surely rising and spreading. The place where the stone statue fell turned out to be a huge volcanic crater. The entire volcanic crater was circular, with a diameter of more than 1,000 meters, forming a huge cylindrical abyss. Thick black smoke erupted from here, forming countless black petal-like volcanic ash that fell everywhere. The entire upper body of the giant stone statue hit the edge of the crater, and its head hung in the middle of the crater, being roasted by waves of heat. The blazing red light completely dyed the entire stone statue red, and the two people standing above it were also dyed red. Idle! Return! Garen roared violently, and the platinum energy all over his body exploded crazily. It turned into a white golden circle and hovered above the head. The huge impact slammed into Xianflan in all directions. Eye of all thoughts! Xianflan also roared, and the eye-shaped piece of flesh between his eyebrows cracked open, and an invisible sharp force of thought spurted out like the tip of a knife, hitting the platinum impact. Boom! Two invisible forces collided, and Xianflan flew backwards far away, falling into the crater of the volcano. His right hand suddenly grabbed the edge of the stone statue, but for some reason, his hand suddenly hung in the air and retracted. A trace of confusion and tranquility suddenly appeared on his face, as if his thoughts had drifted to an unknown place for a moment. Snapped! Garen's hand grabbed his right hand and hung it on the cliff. Some fine gravel fell down, falling into the fiery red magma, and was instantly melted and submerged. Do you really want to die that much? Garen gritted his teeth and looked at Xianflan. Don't you think the red color of the flame is very beautiful? Xianflan smiled, and for some reason, his smile was filled with a hint of confusion. Woo! Suddenly, a piercing scream came from the clouds in the sky. Garen looked up and saw the sound of a plane flying through the air. Snapped! Suddenly Xianflan broke free from his hand, lay on his back, and fell quietly. His windbreaker rustled in the air, like a black swallow falling into the red ocean. What a beautiful red, he murmured, looking at the red light on his body. Then he looked at Garen, who was looking at him with wide eyes on the edge of the cliff. At this moment, Garen's face suddenly overlapped with that arrogant and handsome face. Brother, I didn't expect that I wouldn't be able to get out of your shadow in the end. Silently, Xianflan quietly fell into the magma and was completely submerged. There was no trace left, just like the previously fallen rocks. You guy, Garen clenched his fist tightly, his teeth clenched and his muscles all over his body were trembling violently. He moved his hand to the right side of his neck, where a scarlet incision was clearly visible, which was easily stabbed by the eye of 10,000 thoughts just now. If Sylvia had used this trick from the beginning. You are actually giving me such a victory. Garen felt an unprecedented sense of humiliation and unwillingness. In the long-awaited final battle, his opponent is still letting him. Woo! Suddenly there was a piercing scream in the sky. Garen raised his head, just in time to see an oval-shaped black thing falling vertically towards him. In an instant, an extremely strong sense of crisis surged from my heart. Want me to die? His whole body swelled violently, and his white gold energy expanded wildly in all directions. While roaring wildly, Garen raised his fist and swung it towards the sky. Behind him, a huge platinum statue took shape. It also raised its fist and waved it towards the sky. A silent flash. A black mushroom cloud suddenly rose, and a huge amount of radiation spread crazily in all directions. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 227. A huge amount of radiation covered the sky and flew in all directions. The explosion was silent for a few seconds before it exploded loudly. An extremely dazzling flash of light instantly blinded the eyes of countless people around him. In the waters around the smoke island, on many ships that had escaped, everyone who looked at the smoke island had their eyes completely plunged into darkness because of this flash of light. On a white ship, Nightmare and Andromeda stood quietly on the edge of the ship's side, looking at the huge mushroom cloud rising in the distance, both of them looking ugly. Although at the last moment, both of them relied on their extraordinary reflexes and vigilance to avoid the explosive flash that blinded their eyesight, it was not this that made their faces look ugly. Andromeda held her hands on the side of the ship, faintly showing fingerprints on the metal side of the ship. The nuclear bomb must belong to Wiseman. It's just a small-yield nuclear bomb. I just heard that the Wiseman test was successful. I didn't expect it. Nightmare looked at the shockwave coming from the direction of the mushroom cloud. Their purpose was not to kill the people on the island, but to trigger the entire smoke island. Giant volcano. Boom. The ship was swaying like a small paper boat in the waves stirred up by the shockwave, and was in danger of capsizing at any time. Teams of sailors began to stabilize the ships in an orderly manner and increase their horsepower. Head away from the island. The mushroom cloud persisted, and black smoke pillars continued to rise into the sky below. Boom. There was another violent vibration, and a red halo suddenly shot up above the island of smoke. The halo suddenly dispersed and sputtered down in all directions, revealing masses of black, red, and fiery red magma. Countless magma flew in all directions like raindrops, and a large amount of magma quickly covered the entire island of smoke like viscous liquid, turning it into an island of fiery red magma. A large amount of black volcanic ash flew up one after another, covering the entire sky and sea area of thousands of kilometers in radius. Some ships that were too close were directly overturned by huge waves, and some were hit by magma raindrops, directly broken, or burned. The ship where Nightmare and Andromeda were located was hit by a ball of magma in the center, and was cut into two pieces with a click. The screams and exclamations were all drowned in the endless volcanic eruption. The dim sunlight in the sky was directly blocked by thick black smoke and volcanic ash, making the day look like night. The blue-black sea is covered with countless black floating objects of volcanic ash, like countless ink spots splashed on a blue-black handkerchief. Some burning ships released dim red firelight on the sea, like small red dots, floating and sailing away desperately. Nightmare and Andromeda each took one person with them and swam quickly outside the area covered by the volcano. But even so, the poisonous smoke emitted by a large number of volcanoes continued to corrode their lungs. They all also understood that no matter how powerful Galleon was, he would not be able to survive such a terrifying power of nature. A large number of masters who did not have time to escape were all affected by this wave, and only 10% managed to escape. And Weissman's goal was finally achieved. This time, many top players in the world were buried at once. And for them with the strongest technological strength, it is definitely the best development environment. In an instant, the world structure completely changed here. Black. Everything in front of me is black. Garen only remembered that he finally burst out with all his anger and punched the bomb in the sky. He knew the other party's purpose, which was to detonate the volcano. Smoke Island is actually considered to be the largest volcano in the world, and there are huge volcanic mountains under the sea. The capacity is astonishing. In fact, the entire Smoke Island is actually the crater of this volcano, so countless white smoke continues to seep out from the ground, which is a sign that it is about to erupt. Once this huge volcano erupts, several small countries around it will be affected, and the resulting atmospheric pollution will cause extremely serious damage to the entire planet. Galen estimated that Weismann simply underestimated the scale and destructive power of this volcano, which was why he took such an unwise action. But none of this matters anymore. What matters is what is happening to him now. He wanted to move his body, but found that he had no concept of arms and legs at all. It was as if he was in a dream, and his brain felt a little dazed and chaotic. The surroundings were completely dark and nothing could be seen. Only at the last moment, the huge heat and pain that my body felt was still fresh in my memory. He clearly remembered that his body had been completely melted by the huge amount of high temperature. The volcano that exploded at that moment was like the anger of the earth. The entire Smoke Island crater erupted with an infinite amount of white and golden magma, and the high temperature exceeding 1,000 degrees completely melted it in an instant. In fact, the moment he saw the bomb, he already had a premonition that he would definitely not be able to escape. If it is just a powerful bomb, it is not terrible. If it is scattered, the huge earthquake and explosives will have some impact on you. As long as the so-called high temperature of the explosion is not the core point, there will be no problem with your own temperature resistance. But the trouble is, that is not a bomb, but a nuclear bomb. Although it is immature, it is indeed a small-yield nuclear bomb. And the most terrible thing is not this, but that the Smoke Island is a huge crater that may erupt at any time. The nuclear bomb is just an introduction. Volcanic eruptions are the real killer. The impact and high temperature that broke out at that moment left him no room to resist and was completely swallowed up. I never thought it would end like this. Garin quietly recalled in the darkness that Xianflan and himself were the two most powerful people in the world. If Xianflan did not deliberately seek death in the end and then gave in to each other, it is estimated that their final result would be to die together. In fact, at this level, he possesses the divine statue skill, is physically strong, and has sufficient energy, to an astonishing level. And Xianflan is not bad either. The explosive power is terrifying and the lethality is so strong that even galleons can't match it. What he lacks is nothing more than his resilience. But everything was completely doomed when Xianflan deliberately gave in. When two masters with similar strength deliberately give in to each other, the result is obvious. In fact, Garin also understood it in the dark. After that, it was no longer the world of martial arts. When personal martial arts reached their level, it was already at its peak, and it was impossible to make progress anymore. Next, it should be the age of firearms, just like the earth. At this point in martial arts, it may just be his last song. He looked around, everything was pitch black. Death may be the final outcome for others, but for me, it is obviously not. Staying alone in the dark, without the concept of a body, as if you are just an invisible mass. Garin didn't know how long he stayed in this darkness. 1 day. 2 days. 1 year. 2 years. He didn't know how long he stayed. He took the initiative to count every minute. Unfortunately, after counting tens of millions, there was still no movement. Gradually, he seemed to have returned to the time when he first traveled through the universe. Thinking gradually came to a standstill. I don't know how long it took, but suddenly, he seemed to have passed through some fog and saw a glimmer of light. In the infinite distance in the darkness, a dark blue nebula finally slowly appeared. The nebula is getting closer and bigger. On one of the light blue planets, scenes of continuous scenes flashed impressively. It seems like countless rays of light are radiating towards this side. Garin only felt that he was watching these scenes with incomparable clarity. They were all the various events and changes that were constantly happening on that planet. It flashed before his eyes like a movie. Suddenly he felt a burning sensation coming from his side. He looked down and saw a simple book pendant necklace floating slowly beside him. It was the Eternal Night Star necklace that he had always worn. Unfortunately, this necklace with unknown efficacy was already covered with dense cracks. Although the surface shone with a white shimmer, it was getting darker and darker, and seemed to be about to disappear completely. A familiar light red symbol suddenly flashed under Garen's field of vision. The unknown energy is about to be exhausted. The shuttle is about to stop. Will it automatically enter the nearest planet? Garen was stunned. The Evernight star actually existed as an energy source for traveling through the universe. Reacting quickly, he answered immediately. Yes. Suddenly, his innate abilities started to work, and he felt as if countless tiny red lines were flowing all over his body, pulling him towards a planet at a rapid speed. After a few beats and flashes, he was immediately at an extremely close distance. The target planet is the one we just saw. The planet grew larger and clearer, and Garen finally looked back behind him. A similarly light blue planet has completely turned into a small dot, as inconspicuous as the stars in the sky. I will return. Laugh. Speed surges. He only felt dizzy and completely lost consciousness. The stars of eternal night also made a complete click and shattered into countless fragments, scattered in the universe. Night. In a bright study room, a young man about 20 years old was writing something. He sat at the red copper desk, holding a white quill pen and dipping it in black ink from time to time. After thinking for a while, he continued to write on the white paper. The bright yellow candlelight illuminated his handsome and pale face. On April 20, 3567 of the solar calendar, I met Miss Gillis from Walton again. Oh my God, for the third time in my life I was burned by her beauty. She is so beautiful, as pure as lilies, as bright as the moon, as beautiful as. The young man stopped writing decisively and began to think carefully about the next compliment. Ah, he suddenly sighed and put a hand on his chest. Beautiful Gila, see, I am your destined prince. Vomit. There was a slight running sound outside the door. Little Giles. You eavesdropped on me writing poetry again. Stop. The young man immediately dropped his pen and rushed to the door to open it. It was dark outside, and down the stairs from the second floor, a small figure was running down the stairs several times. Disappeared without a trace. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 228. The young man closed the door angrily and returned to the desk to sit down. He knew he had a bad reputation at home, but this was his pursuit, his dream. From the moment he saw Miss Gillis, he couldn't help but fall in love with her completely. He is willing to pay everything for it. Even life. When he thought of this, he suddenly felt like he was possessed by ancient poets, as if in an instant he was elevated to the realm of those great poets who devoted themselves to love. This feeling of sublimation made him suddenly intoxicated. Last time, Miss Gillis asked me to help her get her father's documents to read. I don't know how they are now, he suddenly thought with some happiness. Miss Gillis saw that he worked so hard and paid so much for her. You will definitely be deeply moved and fall deeply in love with him in the end. Then the two of you will abandon everything and fly away, becoming another swan song in the history of love and romance in the world. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly there was a gentle knock on the door. Sia, are you asleep? A clear female voice came from outside the door. Cousin Sophie? Please come in, the door is unlocked. Young Shia stood up quickly, with a happy smile on her face. The door was pushed open with a click. A tall, beautiful woman walked in. How many times have I told you? Call me Cousin Hathaway. The woman wore a high blonde ponytail, her face was as sharp as a knife, her skin was fair, and she exuded a compelling sense of heroism and coolness. Oh, Cousin Hathaway, Shia nodded quickly. By the way, sister, why did you come to me so late? What's the matter? The woman walked around the room, and finally her eyes fell on the white paper on the young man's table. Where did you take my astronomical code last time? Shia suddenly shrank, and Nyonyota giggled. What astronomical secret order? Sister, what are you talking about? When did I take your things? Hathaway narrowed her eyes, staring at his favorite cousin. Brother, if you use the astronomical secret order yourself, I won't say anything, but if someone instigates you. She worked hard for the royal agency and finally obtained 2 astronomical secret orders. This was the result of more than 10 years of hard work. Ahashia was the one she watched growing up. He was the only male in the family, and he had been particularly loved since he was a child. It doesn't matter if you give him a secret order, but if someone with intentions encourages him to do this. No one encouraged me, Shia shook her head quickly, and he immediately reacted and quickly denied it. I didn't take that astronomical secret order. Sister, believe me. Hathaway was silent for a moment and reached out to rub Shia's hair. Forget it, I don't need that thing anyway. Don't do this again. I really didn't take it, Shia was still denying. He actually didn't know what the astronomical code meant, or how important it was. For my cousin, it was proof of her achievements and rewards that she had worked hard for all her life. It is equivalent to a gold medal to avoid death. No matter how big the sin is, it can be forgiven through this. Also, you gambled with others at the casino and lost 2 estates, right? Hathaway changed the subject. Do you know how valuable these 2 manors are, especially the manor near Varian? Are they just exported by you so easily? I will win it back sooner or later, Shia replied bitterly, looking at her cousin's slightly angry face. She suddenly became a little afraid. When he was 10 years old, he was bitten by a venomous snake of a different species, and it was his cousin Hathaway who rescued him with a secret medicine he found from nowhere. At that time, Hathaway learned that her brother was poisoned, and left without saying a word for 2 days. After returning, she, who had always been strong, was seriously injured. As a result, her strength dropped a lot, and she retired from the Royal Knights. Joined the royal agency and became an ordinary lieutenant. The astronomical secret order is the proof and reward of her meritorious service in the Royal Knights. Now that a secret astronomical order was taken away by him, Shia felt slightly guilty. I will make it up to you in the future, sister, he replied in a low voice. Hathaway suddenly became furious when she saw that her cousin still looked like a dead pig who was not afraid of boiling water. I'm not asking you to compensate. You must understand the dangers of gambling. Look at how much wealth you have exported in the past few years. How much money you have exported from the second uncle's family. If you continue like this, no matter how rich it is, your family's fortune will also be ruined by you. Her voice got louder and louder, and she got angrier. Sister, you have to believe me. I will definitely win it back, Shia quickly replied. You still want to bet? Hathaway finally couldn't help it and slapped Shia hard on the face. Snapped. Shia was stunned, and so was Hathaway. Shia has been the only male in the family since he was a child, and he has been loved by thousands of people. Even his father Thesis has never been willing to beat him. And now, for the first time, Hathaway couldn't help but hit him. Both of them were stunned for a moment. What's so great? Didn't I just take a secret astronomical order from you? You actually hit me. Shia's face turned red and her chest heaved violently. I'm telling you, Sophie Hathaway. No matter how much you lose, it's all my own family's business. In the future, it will all be my Ahashia's family property. If I lose in gambling, what does it have to do with you? I am the Terry Jones family. The heir. You are just a royal lieutenant. What qualifications do you have to take care of me? You. Hathaway was so angry that she pointed at Ahashia and was speechless for a moment. She didn't expect that her cousin, whom she had loved all her life, would say such hurtful words to her. Sadness, disappointment, anger, all kinds of emotions suddenly filled her heart at the moment. Without any hesitation, Hathaway turned around and left, slamming the door. Ahashia angrily covered the left side of her face and lightly tapped her cheek. Hiss. It hurts. He took a few steps back and reached out to touch the red medicated oil on the bookshelf next to him. It was an anti-swelling medicated oil for treating abrasions. It was very effective. Suddenly he remembered that this was also something Hathaway gave to him. I will never use what she gave me again. No way. He grabbed the glass bottle of red medicinal oil and smashed it on the ground. Wow! The vial immediately shattered on the floor. Red medicinal oil was also sprinkled all over the floor. Even my father never beat me. Ahashia walked around the room angrily. There were clouds outside, there was faint thunder, and it seemed like it was going to rain. Click. Suddenly a thunder exploded from above his head. Ahashia was startled, and accidentally, the red oil slipped under his feet, and he fell straight up to the sky. Bang! The back of his head hit a raised shard of glass. In an instant, his eyes suddenly rolled up, his body arched upwards, he struggled a few times, and gradually lost his breath completely. At this moment, a white light suddenly came in from the square window. The white light was only the size of a fist and shaped like a butterfly. It penetrated directly through the closed window and circled around the room, appearing extremely weak. Soon it found Ahashia lying on the ground. With a scoff, the white light directly penetrated Ahashia's forehead and disappeared completely. I don't know how long it took, but Ahashia, who was lying on the floor, suddenly opened his eyes. There was a faint confusion in his eyes, as if someone who had been sleeping for a long time suddenly woke up. He slowly raised his upper body and found that he was sitting on the light red floor. There were tiny shards of glass behind him. Sitting on it was a bit piercing his buttocks, which was very uncomfortable. Touching the back of his head, his hair was a little cold and there were some coagulated blood clots, but the wound had completely healed. Shia stood up and looked around. Sure enough, it's no longer in the original place. He took a deep breath and gently clenched his fists. An unprecedented feeling of weakness came from his body. Just lying on the floor for a long time, my body felt a biting chill. Ah! He sneezed involuntarily. As soon as I cleared my nose, the mucus flowed down from my nose. Who am I? He kept clenching his fists and then unclenching them. I am Ahashia. No. I am Garin Lombard. His eyes gradually became clearer, and his whole person slowly revealed a sense of sharpness that he had never experienced before. Boom, boom, boom. Master, can you come in and clean? A cautious maid asked from outside. She had been waiting for such a long time, and it was likely that the young master had lost his temper before he dared to come over to clean, otherwise he would be scolded by Ahashia again and lose part of this month's monthly payment. No. You go down first. I don't want to see anyone now. Garin said loudly, imitating Ahashia's tone in his memory. This is also the most commonly used sentence in his memory, so just copy the accent. The language used here is a language similar to Portuguese, and Garin is slightly familiar with the language and writing system from Ahashia's memory. Then it's time to sort out the messy brain memories. Ahashia's memory lasted for 20 years, although many of them were forgotten by the forgetting mechanism. But it was still difficult to absorb it all at once, so Garin could only pick out the main contents and read them. This world is very similar to the previous world, both are Western cultural societies. But the level of technology is completely different. This place has barely entered the steam age, and is far inferior to the technology in the previous world. In this world, the feudal system is still dominant, but the bourgeoisie has become more and more prosperous. The name of this body is Ahashia Terry Jones, followed by a long list of surnames, and he is the sole heir of the Terry Jones family. The entire planet is divided into two continents, East Continent and West Continent. There are many island countries in between. There are hundreds of countries in Eastern Continent, among which 3 are the most powerful, the Great Kuwaitan Empire is one of them. There are a total of 32 provinces in Kuwaitan. There is a province in the south called Green Forest, and its central area is where the family where this body is located. There are only 5 direct members of the Terry Jones family in this generation. The patriarchal couple, Ahashia herself, as well as cousin Sophie Hathaway and her sister Dani Hathaway. And Ahasha has lived for so long and has never left the Green Forest province in her entire life. The city where his family is located and several surrounding cities are his entire scope of activities. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 230. Throughout Ahashia's life, this guy was addicted to gambling, fond of women, and had a funny mind. He was deceived by a woman named Gyli into not even knowing his mother's last name. He sold all the more important things in his home to Gyli to increase his favorability. Jialung took a deep breath, looked at the countless bad things on this body, and then compared it with his previous life, Jialung, and his previous life, Luojing. Although the first two have much higher IQs, they are obviously far less idiotic than this one. Okay. Let's see how the current situation is first. He calmed down and began to carefully check the condition of his body. The familiar light red power text appeared again at the bottom of the field of vision. Strength 0.8, Agility 0.8, Constitution 0.7, Intelligence 0.4, Potential 1872%, has unknown qualifications. Secret Martial Arts, God Statue Skill, Vientiane Fighting Skills. Full recovery time is 377 days, 1 year. Garen frowned slightly. It actually takes a year to regain strength. And why is this body so weak? But what's going on with this unknown qualification? The power did not give a reply, obviously because the information in the memory was insufficient. He continued to look at the last symbol. Naturally, the meaning contained in a symbol quickly appeared in his mind. Because the unknown energy protects the shuttle, the subject's potential is not lost, and all states can be slowly restored through soul adjustment. Unknown energy? Does it mean the eternal night star? Garen thought thoughtfully, the main body's potential has not been lost. Does it mean that if there is no eternal night star, I will have to practice secret martial arts from scratch? He recalled the scene when he first traveled through time. At that time, he traveled all by himself. There may be some electrical energy in it, but that current is definitely very small. Suddenly he saw a strange symbol at the end of the power column. Not a light red, but a dark red that appeared for the first time. He focused his attention on the symbol. If you find unknown information, should you capture it? Unknown image information found, do you want to capture it? Start automatically protecting shuttle memory. Unknown image recording started. Unknown space-time fluctuations are generated. Energy is shattered. The fluctuations cease. Do you want to call up the recorded information? 4 pieces of information rushed into Garen's memory. Obviously, if he didn't have supernatural protection, his memory might be erased by time and space travel. He also vaguely understood at this time, and a faint enlightenment rose from his heart. That red fragment unlocked his own superpowers, and in the previous world, Miwu achieved the unity of spirit, energy, and spirit, pushing his superpowers to a level that no one could imagine. Therefore, he could immediately recall the entire process of traveling this time, instead of just remembering a vague outline like the first time. But what is this record about? Garen suddenly recalled the light on the planet he saw while traveling. He pushed open the window and quickly cleaned the floor, leaving only some red oil that could not be removed. The room was filled with the smell of medicinal oil. He had to leave the window open to let the cold wind blow in for ventilation. Anyway, it would take a long time to regain his strength, so he simply pulled out a chair and sat down, and quietly began to recall the light he saw when he traveled back and forth. It was an unparalleled light with no color. Now that Garen recalled it, he still couldn't tell what color it was. It's like a 2D picture scene appears on a 3D object, and just by looking at the 2D picture, you can instantly read a lot of content that is not displayed. This weird feeling made him a little uncomfortable. He firmly believes that as long as he understands the nature of his powers, he can find his way home, whether it is to the previous world or the original Earth. In any case, there were too many things in the first two worlds that he couldn't let go of. He leaned back on the chair and began to organize his thoughts one by one. How did you see that beam of light? Why didn't I see it the first time I traveled through time? Is it the function of my enhanced powers? And among so many planets, why can I find one so quickly? A planet with people? And it seems to be coming here specifically. He recalled the scene during the shuttle. As if there was a force pulling him, he was flying straight towards the planet, and at an extremely fast speed. You must know that when he first traveled through the universe, he stayed in the universe for a long time and passed through countless uninhabited planets and star fields before he encountered Garen's planet. But this time it was much faster no matter how you looked at it. Finally, his eyes fell on the symbol behind the ability column again. It seems that we should be able to find clues from the unknown image information recorded. Do you want to call up the recorded information? The symbol appears again asking. Yes. Garen replied in the affirmative. Silently, a huge flow of information rushed into his mind. Ah! He lowered his head and covered his head, only to feel his brain become confused for a moment. It was accompanied by a severe tearing headache, as if the brain had been split in two with an axe, and a bunch of stuff had been stuffed in the middle and then sewn shut. The light from the planet's appearance quickly flooded into his memory. Scene after scene after scene, flashes and passes rapidly in the brain. A series of wars, conflicts, changes. The change of political power, the change of the world, the change of power. That is the light from the past, the historical light emanating from the major events that have happened on this planet. And he unexpectedly received it while traveling countless light years away. Countless streams of information were suddenly poured into Garen's brain. Earth Flower Society, Black Sky Society, Totem, Silver Lantern Master, Fall of Royal Power, Rise and Fall of Country, Transformation of Planet. A huge number of images flashed quickly in my mind instantly. Soon, these pictures gradually connected into a complete structure. In October 3570 of the solar calendar, a great revolution and uprising occurred in Dongzhou. The Kuwaitan Empire was the second country to fall. What countless pictures tell is actually just a history. There are a large number of political empires on the surface of this world. The emperors use cold weapons and backward firearms to rule the world. But beneath the hidden reality, there is a group of people who call themselves Silver Lantern Masters. They hold power called totems. Silver Lantern Masters are professional masters who make totems from silver and ignite them to produce special abilities. They are professionals in making totems and rare resource talents. The world revolves around the totem Silver Lantern Masters. The Silver Lantern Masters hide in the darkness of the world and hold the real power. They are divided into two main factions, the Silver Lanterns and the Ghost Silver Lanterns, each adhering to different philosophies. The change of the world is actually the change of the Silver Lantern Masters. The silver light that represents holiness and the ghost silver light that represents evil are the two main themes of the entire world. This actually represents the different views of the two factions, whether peace is the priority or the law of the jungle is the priority. This is the difference in management. One is that power should serve the peace of the majority of people, and the other is that the majority of people should serve the evolution of power. This is the difference between the two factions. This also represents two political systems, democracy and kingship. Among them, the representative of Silver Lanterns is an organization of Silver Lantern makers called Daihua Society. The representative of the Ghost Silver Lantern is an organization of Silver Lantern Masters called Black Sky Society. The two factions have been fighting for a long time, and they are the strongest top forces in the entire Silver Lantern Master Totem world. What drove the entire change was a young man named Baker Stone Eyes and some of his companions around him. They are the descendants of the Earth Flower Society who represent the light of silver, and are also the most powerful group of Silver Lantern Masters in the future. After Garen completely straightened out the entire structure, he finally understood some of the key points. To put it simply, it is the history of this man named Baker Stone Eyes and his friends, who went all the way through and finally defeated the Ghost Gate of the Black Sky Society, the master of the Ghost Silver Lantern. Obviously, these things happened during the Great Uprising, when the king's power was shaky. And this body is still in a time when the king's power was stable, and the world had not even reported an uprising. If what I saw is true. He suddenly remembered the information record he just saw. The last record, the generation of unknown space-time fluctuations. Theoretically speaking, two planets suitable for human habitation are still between different galaxies, at least countless light-years apart. And I span so many light-years at once. According to the theory of relativity, going back in time is not it's impossible, he speculated carefully. If we really go back in time, then the things and scenes I saw might be everything that will happen to this planet in the future. In other words, I was countless light years away, received unknown light with supernatural powers, and then saw what happened on this planet. But the super light speed spanning countless light years in an instant brought me back to where these things happened. The time before the great event. He could barely organize his current thoughts. Now only this guess can connect all the clues together and appear reasonable. Assuming these speculations are true, judging from the recorded information. The change ultimately ended with the failure of the Ghost Silver Lantern, the complete collapse of the Black Sky Society, and the complete establishment of a capitalist social system in the world. In other words, it was the Silver Lantern that gained victory. From this point of view, this Baker Stone Eye is the legendary trendsetter, the so-called protagonist. He is a person who came into being at the right time. Even without him, a second Baker Stone Eye will emerge under the general trend. His little friend. This is caused by the urgent desire of the world class. The most troublesome thing now is not this. Garen frowned, judging from the memory of Ahashia in this body. His father Vindman is an upper-class noble of the Kuwaitan Empire and has strong power and influence. And there is another identity, that is, as a Silver Lantern Master on the edge of the Black Sky Society, but he is still relatively independent and has not completely fallen into it. But the situation is very bad. His face was gloomy. If all those things are true and will happen in the future. The father of this body is Vindman. As a supporter of royal power, he also belongs to the Ghost Silver Lantern section, an ordinary Silver Lantern Master. And Vindman, in the future scene, is one of the Ghost Silver Lanterns destined to be killed by Baker Stone Eyes and Black Sky Society. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 231. The identity of Garen's rebirth after time travel is Ahashia, the son of the Silver Lantern Master who was wanted to be killed by both the Silver Lantern and the Ghost Silver Lantern. His father, the Silver Lantern Master Vindman, was just an average Silver Lantern Master. Occupying a place, but they are destined to be wiped out by the two factions because of their previous mistakes and their disobedience to the command of the Black Sky Society. His family's territory was destined to be occupied, and all the servant families were wiped out, becoming one of the strongholds of the rebel army. It's too early to think about this now. Let's see if my speculation is true. Garen stood up, walked to the window, and looked out. If my speculation is true, based on the current time, it won't be long before news of the failure of the First Valley Uprising will come. After that, it will gradually become difficult for tenants to collect rent. Garen let the cold wind blow against his face and golden hair. The cold air suddenly sobered up his somewhat heated brain. Look, if it goes according to what is recorded in the information I saw, then I really need to make plans in advance. The father of this body, Vindman, is a headstrong man, but he treats his only son well and regards him as the root of the family's inheritance. It's a pity that in order to study the special abilities of the ghost Silver Lantern, he secretly captured some boys and girls as materials for experiments, and among them happened to be Baker's first childhood love, Lyanna. Lyanna is dead. This is a deadly feud, and it is still an unforgivable feud. In the face of the negative forces, Vindman maintained his status, obeyed the Black Sky Society's orders, and disobeyed orders many times. In the end, dissatisfaction gradually accumulated, and he was killed by an elite member of the Black Sky Society because he developed a good special ability. If it's all true, it's not surprising that under the general trend, countless Silver Lantern masters like Vindman have died. Galen looked out the window. In the dark night, in the dark mountain forest in the distance, there is a faint row of yellow dots arranged in a line, slowly moving to the left. They were small torches, and they were the mountain guards of another family nearby. Boom! Suddenly, the yellow torch team paused, and there was a crisp gunshot, which was also vaguely mixed with the cry of a deer. In the distance, Garen heard a burst of laughter from the torch team, which seemed to be very happy. It's a wild deer again. Good luck. Ha ha. The voice came from far away and was very weak. The torch team quickly disappeared from view. There was no movement on the mountain opposite. Garen withdrew his gaze and looked around closely. He was standing on the second floor of a double-story wooden building that was a small part of a large manor. There are more than 10 small buildings in the entire manor, varying in size and height, arranged into different branches. All painted a neat white. Ahashia lives here with his father and a housekeeper. The others include maids, grooms, gardeners, cooks, etc., a total of more than 10 people. The entire manor is equivalent to 2 of the largest football fields. Walking from one end to the other, going around and around, you may even get lost. The small building he is currently in is at the far right edge of the manor. Ahashia is a person who is very afraid of his father. Although Vindman never hits him, his gloomy and strong temperament makes Ahashia dare not stay for a moment longer. Every time he greets him in a business-like manner. Then he fled in a hurry. Even the place to stay was chosen in the small building farthest from the middle. Just to stay away from my father. Today, my cousin Sophie Hathaway and little Giles, who often come to play, are here. Young Giles was the son of Ahashia's father's favorite student. Like my cousin, I occasionally come over to see my father Vindman. Garen listened carefully to the movements around him, and in the distance there was the faint sound of little Giles talking loudly, and a few rapid barkings of dogs. Apparently this guy is playing with the dog again. There were also the footsteps of the night watch servant passing by below the small building. This manor is located deep in the mountains, somewhat isolated from the world. It is surrounded by its own vegetable gardens, farmland, livestock sheds, and its own town at the foot of the mountain, making it almost self-sufficient. Father Vindman has been staying in the manor, disappearing all day long, not knowing what he is doing. He doesn't go out to socialize, and only occasionally attends classes at the Royal Academy. After all, he is still a professor there. Other than that, there is no movement, and this situation has been maintained for 5 years. On the other hand, Ahashia herself often goes out to attend dances and banquets in the surrounding areas. My cousin would come over to see him occasionally. In addition, the only opportunity for the manor to communicate with the outside world is, every once in a while, the housekeeper will go out to collect rent and taxes, sell specialties, and when she comes back, she will also bring back some necessary daily necessities and spices. He straightened his messy hair and carefully pulled off the blood clot on the back of his head, which made his hair hurt. Sitting down at the desk again, he roughly understood his surroundings. Now the focus is on the so-called Silver Lantern Masters in this world, but we don't know how lethal the Silver Lantern Masters can be by using totems. He clenched his fist gently and felt that his body was gradually regaining strength. Although it was very slow, it was much better than when he just woke up. The strongest Silver Lantern Master is the president of the Black Sky Society, Gui Men, followed by the leader of the Earth Flower Society, Sisley. There is actually information about their fights on the screen. Garen felt very strange. The screen information he saw, most of it feels like the adventure journey of Baker Stone Eyes. From the beginning to the final defeat of the Ghost Silver Lamp representing the Black Sky Society, every major event is recorded with extraordinary clarity. As for the rest, everything related to the Silver Lantern Master has been recorded in detail. He didn't know whether it was a supernatural ability or something else. But that's not the most important thing now. He began to carefully search for events in the records, and pictures continued to flash before his eyes. Time passes minute by second. Yes, suddenly he stopped recording a message, and two ordinary-looking figures suddenly appeared in front of him. In Green Forest Province, in the mountains and forests near the territory of the Terry Jones family, there are records of more than 10 Silver Lantern Master fights. Among them, the closest ones are a Silver Lantern Master named Enning and a man named Creed. The Ghost Silver Lantern Garen carefully checked this part of the record, but perhaps their strength was too weak and they were only at the level of low-level Silver Lantern Masters, so the picture was blurry and nothing could be seen clearly. All I saw was a mass of colored lines at the beginning of the fight, and then just like a TV show that had no signal, all the images recorded by the supernatural ability were mixed together and turned into colorful snowflakes. Let me check the time. To be precise, it was before the incident of difficulty in collecting rent and behind the Valley Uprising. It was these 2 days. Garen sifted through this recent combat record. There was a lot of screen information recorded by the superpower, all in detail. There were too many. Garen also sorted it out in his memory for a long time before he found this recent detail. It's time to take a closer look at how the lowest level Silver Lantern Master compares in power to the secret martial arts. Garen took a deep breath, stood up and fell onto the soft bed. Pulling the white quilt over to cover him, he suddenly felt sleepiness coming over him. From the battle before time travel, to traveling through the universe, to now sorting out memory information, his nerves have always been tense. Now that he has completely understood the situation and there is no crisis around him, he can finally relax. Ahashia is dead. From now on, I am the new Ahashia, Garen thought silently as he lay on his back on the bed, feeling his new and somewhat unfamiliar body. Hazy, he gradually fell into sleep. In his sleep, he went back to the moment when he finally punched the nuclear bomb on the smoke island. At that moment, the nuclear bomb erupted with extremely dazzling light, and then the volcanic power erupted below, and his body was shattered and melted in an instant. The huge force erupted from the volcano first blasted his extremely strong body to pieces, and then the high temperature of thousands of degrees and the nuclear bomb completely melted him into ashes. Then the huge force of the volcanic eruption, carrying his last bit of consciousness, shot straight into the sky. In his sleep, Garen looked back at the moment he flew out of the planet. The huge island of smoke and the erupting volcano were like a giant black pot. So this is the legendary black tobacco bottle, Garen suddenly understood. So what does the legend mean that it can communicate with the underworld? And how did the ancient Yinduo civilization discover the mystery of this volcano and build so many stone statues on it? And until the end, I didn't find any traces of the dead. A black tobacco bottle that can break through the limits. I guess no one has succeeded in history, right? Garen thought thoughtfully. Whether it was a rumor that turned into a mystery, or a rumor that was caused by a mystery, nothing is known. But one thing that is certain is that it was definitely not an accident that he was able to reach here, to this planet. Without the help of volcanoes, it is unlikely that he would have reached this planet anyway. The most bizarre thing is that those few jumps directly spanned countless light years. The last eruption of the Black Smoke Pot volcano was a long time ago. Could it be that the totem abilities on this planet and the so-called Silver Lantern Masters are the products left by the warlocks who came here before? Or at least there will be some contact. Garen suddenly thought of this possibility in his dream. There were not many legends about warlocks in the previous world. In that era of powerful civilization, weird things were possible. Goo 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 goo. Garen opened his eyes, and a beam of pale golden sunlight fell on his quilt. The sunlight passed through the window glass and illuminated the fine floating dust in the air. On the outside window sill, 2 pigeons stood and cooed. Is this here? Garen looked at the unfamiliar ceiling and didn't react for a moment. He sat up and let the sun shine on the back of his hand, which immediately gave him a warm feeling. Soon, he finally came to his senses. I am Shia now, no longer Garen Lombard, nor Luojing. There was a strange expression on his face. The unfamiliar body and the weak body made him extremely uncomfortable. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 232. After sitting quietly on the bed for a while, Garen got out of bed, quickly changed his clothes, took out a set of white casual clothes with silver trim from the closet and put them on. His eyes fell on the attribute bar below his field of vision again. The properties are still the same, no different. He hesitated for a moment, but saw that there were still more than 10 potential points left, but he still did not use them to restore himself in advance. Now that we have not found a new source of energy, we can only save potential points as much as possible. The potential points are all absorbed from the Antiques of Doom, and the world does not yet know whether there are Antiques of Doom. Even if it exists, more than 10 potential points are still a great wealth and cannot be used indiscriminately. He tidied his clothes. Garen was usually a very clean and beautiful person. He kept his body neatly arranged and also liked to use various perfumes. Garen frowned and looked at the desk. On it lay the unfinished diary from last night. It's full of praise and admiration for that rose. He walked over and flipped through it, but there was almost no substance in it. Closing the notebook gently, he walked to the full-length mirror, picked up the comb hanging by the mirror and began to comb his hair, arranging it neatly and beautifully, just like Ahashia usually. Then he frowned and picked up a bottle of commonly used perfume and sprayed it on his body. A man actually wears perfume. He put down the perfume bottle with a slight displeasure. After checking in the mirror and closing his eyes to make sure nothing was missing, Garen opened the door and walked out of the bedroom. Follow the light yellow wooden corridor and the spiral staircase down to the first floor. 2 maids in the hall were tidying up and cleaning the room. When they saw Garen coming down, they put down their things, silently curtsied to him, and then continued to do their own thing. Garen glanced at the 2 maids. They were both 40 years old and not pretty. They were just very quick with their hands and feet and were good at doing things. He walked through the lobby on the first floor and walked out of the small building. Outside are patches of green lawn, like patches of emerald jade, which look extremely pure in the sunlight. A few sparse gray trees dotted the area, their leaves rustling in the breeze, and a few green and yellow leaves fell from time to time. There are several men and women wearing gray long-sleeved trousers on the lawn, trimming some edge grass. Garen looked up at the sky. The sun had just emerged. It was still early and he hadn't heard the 7 o'clock morning bell. He decided to walk around the entire manor first and get familiar with the environment. Along the lawn, he began to walk slowly between small buildings. There were long and short white buildings with different functions. Some were used for living, some were used for storage, and they also had various functions such as collection and reception. Garen spent 20 minutes, slowly and quickly, walking around the entire manor. The only feeling the entire manor gave him was that of desertedness. There were too few people. A large manor that could accommodate 50 or 60 people only had about a dozen people living there, plus servants, gardeners, grooms, etc. Many areas cannot be cared for and the ground is covered with weeds. A few small buildings even look dusty, with pieces of paint peeling off here and there, as if no one had visited them for some years. Less than 1/3 of the entire estate is actually used. Many places and corners are deserted, giving people a quiet and eerie feeling. Dang! Dang! The melodious morning bell rang. Garin looked up at the tallest clock tower, where someone was ringing the bell. He turned around and strode towards the main building in the middle. It was my morning routine to visit my father, and, most importantly, the housekeeper was there, bringing the latest outside newspapers. Only through newspapers can the Sahasiya person know the situation outside as quickly as possible. Garin narrowed his eyes. He needed to confirm as soon as possible whether the historical pictures he saw while traveling were true. He walked along the patterned lawn towards a small building in the central area. When he walked downstairs, there was a tall middle-aged man standing on the balcony of the room on the second floor. The first impression a man gives people is majesty. This is a tall man with a black beard. His beard was neatly trimmed and merged with black hair at the temples. There are also 2 slender mustaches on his lips, and a pointed beard on his chin. The beard does not give people a messy and thick feeling. Instead, it makes people feel slender and neat, not too thick at all. The man was wearing a black coat and stood on the balcony looking down. It's Shia. Yes, Dad. Garin quickly lowered his head and answered as he looked in memory, looking a little coward. Come up, Duchien is back too, bringing you the black Duran perfume you asked for. The man was Ahashia's father, Vindman Terry Jones. This 50-year-old man appears to be an upper-class noble of the Khoatan Empire and a professor of many departments at the Royal Academy. In fact, he is a Silver Lantern Master of the Ghost Silver Lantern section, have strong personal strength. Garin walked into the small building. There were 2 people sitting in the hall on the first floor, a man and a woman, sitting opposite each other on the sofa. These 2 people, one named Adni and the other Mark Allah, are Vindman's most loyal right-hand men and the 2 most powerful elites among his many men. Although he is not a Silver Lantern Master, he is a rare master even in the Royal Guard with his excellent swordsmanship and spear skills. Garin glanced at the 2 men, and he clearly remembered that in the near future, both of them would die at the hands of the invading Baker Stone Eyes. And his father Vindman died prematurely at the hands of elite members of the Black Sky Society. As for himself, Vindman's son, he was killed by the subordinates of the Black Sky Society while escaping from the manor under the protection of his cousin. No matter what, these 2 people are absolutely loyal to the Terry Jones family. All their interests and glory are bound to the Terry Jones family. They are loyal to not only their father Vindman, but also the entire Terry Jones family. Sister Edney, Brother Marzilan. Garin greeted politely according to the names in his memory. Ahaja, are you here so early? Adna said with a smile. The Viscount is upstairs and will be down in a moment. Marzilan was a very gentle uncle. The 2 of them were not very familiar with Ahashia, but because Ahashia was the next generation heir of the family, they still treated him seriously and politely as the head of the family. He was not at all scorned by Garin's own behavior of losing money through gambling. Where's Sister Ducci? Garin glanced around and saw no one. Report to the Viscount above. Marzilan replied. He wears a thin sword at his waist and wears casual and relaxed white and red clothes. Oh. Garin nodded and sat down on the empty sofa on the side. The maid also served him a cup of lemon tea. He picked it up and took a sip, and out of the corner of his eye he immediately saw a stack of newspapers placed under the coffee table. He reached over and took out the newspaper, placed it on his knees and began to leaf through it. Mark Allah and Adna were chatting quietly on the side. Their expressions seemed unhappy and a little solemn. Garin ignored them and focused on flipping through the newspaper in his hand. The first thing I saw was the dangers of private abortion. Garin turned over speechlessly. Have you done a good job of maintaining your body? He turned to the front page of the stack of newspapers with a dull face. Green Forest Health News. He raised his head and saw the smiling faces of Mark Ella and Adna, and there was a faint chuckle from someone unknown in his ears. Okay, I just want to read the latest National Weekly. Is this wrong? Garin shrugged helplessly. Here Marzilan took out a wrinkled grey newspaper from his side and handed it to Garin. After taking the newspaper, Garin caught a glimpse of a huge headline at the first sight. Pimp Arasuvi said that he will visit Kuwaitan in the near future. Below is a line of small print, the leaders of both sides will discuss the issue of unrest in the valley. The valley is in turmoil, Garin whispered. Sunia is one of the two most powerful countries in the eastern continent. It has joined forces with the Kuwaitan Empire to form a stalemate with a superpower in the western continent. Garin continued to look down. It was indeed the valley uprising in the picture he saw. Garin's heart trembled. He continued to look through the rest of the content, but found nothing. Then he changed to the next newspaper. This is the last issue of the National Weekly. The second article on the front page is about the rent protest demonstration by small and medium-sized farmers in the country. Garin suddenly knew something. He first searched through the major events in his memory and determined the date and location. Then look for specific location dates on newspaper reports. They are exactly the same. Suppressing the shock in his heart, Garin put up the newspaper to block himself. It seems that what I saw is very likely what will happen in the future. If the things in those pictures are true, then what I saw is the history of this planet. He closed his eyes and recalled the scenes in the picture. Garin, when did you learn to care about national affairs? Vindman's voice suddenly came from behind. Garin removed the newspaper and immediately found that Marzilan and the other two people had stood up and looked behind him. He stood up and turned around, seeing Vindman wearing a black tuxedo and holding a black top hat in his hand, looking elegant and formal. Next to him stood a beautiful woman with a plump figure. Garin quickly lowered his head. Dad, are you down? I made an appointment with Gassus and left first. You just came and left? Won't you have breakfast together? Vindman came over and sat down on the sofa, and the woman next to him also sat down next to him. No, Garin looked down at Vindman's steps, which were slow and steady, like a precise clock, and he couldn't help but feel a shiver in his heart. Fortunately, his refusal was the same as that of Garin, who did not dare to stay with his father for a moment. This is also consistent with his usual image. Okay, you go ahead and don't come back too late, Vindman replied calmly. Garin nodded quickly, put down the newspaper, and smiled at Marceline and Adna, as well as the woman next to his father. Then he hurriedly walked out of the small building. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 233. This was just a simple morning greeting, but Garin had a huge and complex martial arts experience, but he smelled a strong smell of blood from Vindman, and the Viscount Professor also exuded an extremely sophisticated smell. Rigorous temperament. After leaving the small building, Garin walked on the lawn in the sunshine, and his whole body was warmed by the sun. He went directly to the gate of the manor and asked the coachman to pull out his car for him, a two-person white carriage with silver trim. After getting into the carriage, he ordered the driver to proceed along the only lane out. He was sitting in the car, looking at the surrounding environment passing by on the side. At his request, the carriage took a large circle around the manor, and finally became familiar with the surrounding environment. Terry Jones Manor is surrounded by green mountains and forests on three sides. Only one side is a small lake. The driveway extends down from the woods and leads directly to the small town of Jinghu Town, which is the town of the Terry Jones family, but it is still more than 10 years away. Kilometers to get there. Galen made the carriage circle twice in a row and memorized some of the main terrain before he stopped the carriage, got out of the carriage and walked towards the woods alone. The coachman did not stop him. The surrounding area was the family's territory, and there were family guards patrolling from time to time. The gates were strictly guarded. Walking along the edge of the small lake, Garin soon came to a dense black leaf forest. The dark woods also look a little dark and damp even on a sunny day. Some pigeons raised in the manor were constantly flying around the lake, some were white and some were gray. A group of black swans gracefully cruised slowly on the lake, lowering their heads to comb their feathers from time to time. Garin observed the surroundings bit by bit according to the location of the picture he saw while traveling, and slowly moved closer to the location in his memory. Gradually, he reached the edge of the family patrol area. From a distance, he saw a gray and white sentry tower in the woods, with a black swan flag on a white background and silver edges. That's the flag of the Terry Jones family. There are two sentries in gray and white guarding the sentry tower. One is drinking and the other is hanging clothes. Garin avoided the sentry tower and tried not to let himself be discovered. He walked around in the forest and finally came to an open space where a tombstone was located. The open space was circular, as if it had been specially sorted out by someone. It was surrounded by a small circle of wooden fences, but the fences had rotted away in many places. Garin compared the scenes in his memory. It was here that the two Silver Lantern Masters fought. He carefully checked the marks around the ground. There was no sign of a fight. Obviously the time has not come yet. He walked to the tombstone and looked at the name on it, Hill Clinton Fina Angie. This area was recently included in the family patrol area. It used to be a wasteland. No one expected that there was a dilapidated tomb here. Quietly following the original route, Garin returned to the original family patrol area. And remember this location firmly. This tombstone in the picture is the trigger between the two Silver Lantern Masters, but this has nothing to do with me. The point is that I must get information about the specific strength of the Silver Lantern Masters. Garin thought carefully as he walked back. He has practiced secret martial arts for nearly 3 years. Although he can only reach the highest level with the help of supernatural powers, he has also put in a lot of hard work. From an ordinary person who didn't know anything, he grew up to a master who dared to risk his life and death head-on and fight against a large number of opponents. The self-encouragement, dedication, and persistence cannot be ignored. The height that Maiwo can reach has reached its limit in the battle between Smoke Island and Sien Flan. But judging from the scene when the shuttle came, the Silver Lantern Master's strength was obviously more fantastic. They seemed to be able to control all kinds of forces and engage in desperate confrontations. Their power seems to be much stronger than that of Maiwo. What Garin wants to know most now is who is more powerful between the Maiwo and the Silver Lantern Master. When everything was ready, he returned directly to the manor, returned to his room alone, and began to exercise according to the basic breathing methods of the God statue technique in order to regain his strength as quickly as possible. At the same time, I have to wait slowly for the battle time in my memory. Return to the step-by-step life of the manor, read books and newspapers every day, take care of Ahashia's favorite purple rose garden, and then go out regularly in the afternoon to the edge of the tombstones to see how the situation is from a distance. The rest of the time, Galleon mainly spends exercising. The recovery of the idol skill cannot be completed overnight, it requires continuous stimulation of the body over a long period of time. On top of the superposition of exercise and recovery, the combination of the two makes it obvious that the speed is much faster. He waited silently, remembering the battle between the Silver Lantern Masters in just these few days. Amidst the clatter of forks and knives, Galen and Vindman sat opposite each other, quietly eating the dinner in front of them. The dim afternoon sun shines in from the left window and falls on the ground on the left side of the rectangular white dining table. On the table were turkey, ham, roast goose, squirrel soup, onion stew, and tomato soup. The two of them ate in silence without saying a word. Vindman raised his head and glanced at his son. This son, who had never been very obedient, seemed to have suddenly become better behaved recently. I usually either go out to gamble or chase after that guy Lee, but I didn't expect that in the past few days, I suddenly became calm. When Sophie left yesterday, why didn't you come out to see her off, he asked, don't be so rude next time. Do you hear me? Yes, Dad, Garen replied in a low voice and nodded in agreement. In fact, he didn't expect it and forgot about it. I have been paying close attention to the movements in the cemetery these days, and I don't even know when Sophie left. You did something wrong about the astronomical secret order. Don't think that I won't know if you don't tell me. But since you have given it away, there is no need to take it back again, so as not to make other families look down upon you. I just want to feel sorry for you. Sister Sophie Windman closed his eyes and remained silent for a moment. In this regard, I will compensate her as appropriate. No second time is allowed. Yes, Dad, Garen nodded honestly. This was the original way Ahashia and Vindman got along. No matter what Ahashia did wrong, Vindman looked tepid and not worried or surprised at all. He just took things off his shoulders very lightly and solved them directly. It was too good to say anything to Ahashia. But for some reason, Shia was afraid of this father. She didn't know why. Vindman finished the soup in the bowl, wiped his lips with Bisijuan, and then stood up. Okay, you eat slowly. I will go to the college to attend a symposium in the afternoon and won't be back until very late. You stay in the manor and don't go out. There may be danger at night, so be careful. I got it. Garen nodded quickly in agreement. Could it be dangerous at night? What's the danger? He suddenly had a vague association in his mind. Vindman rarely said this to Ahashia in the past. As a Silver Lantern Master, he said it was dangerous. It's obviously possible to know something. Could it be that something happened in the world of Silver Lantern Masters? Guesses kept flashing through Garen's mind. In the past few days, he has maintained Al-Hajj's original behavior, habits, and life, and tried to minimize interactions with people who are familiar with him. For example, some of Ahashia's former friends. Yesterday, an invitation was sent to a dance, but he declined it. Living in seclusion like this is to try to make the subtle changes in his personality appear inconspicuous. After all, no matter how he disguises himself, there is still a big personality difference between Garen and the original Ahashia. Sitting in his seat, he watched his father Vindman get up and leave the restaurant. Garen speeded up, cleared the food on the plate a few times, wiped his mouth and stood up. The servant next to him brought him mouthwash soup, so he simply swung the soup in his mouth a few times and swallowed it. With the words of going for a walk around the small lake, Garen began to walk slowly along the lake under the protection of two escorting guards. Compared with the soldiers of the previous world, these guards were ordinary, stronger people who wore leather armor and short knives. Only patrol captains were qualified to wear revolvers. Even with Garen's current weak body, he was still able to take care of these two people in 1 or 2 strokes. Even if they were trained in the so-called Royal Special Guards, the result would be the same. I randomly found an excuse to get rid of the 2 guards. Anyway, there were family patrols and sentry towers around, so there was nothing to worry about. Garen came to the far side of the tombstone alone. Vindman's words today made him feel that maybe that battle should happen today. Moreover, the battle in my memory also happened during this time period, which just happened to match. He squatted in the grass and gathered his energy and blood according to Maiwa's breathing method. His chi and blood, which were not strong in the first place, were quickly completely restrained by him. In the previous world, he had also learned the turtle breathing technique after all. While hiding in the grass, Garen carefully observed and listened to all the movements around him. If we follow the division method of the world in my previous life, when I was at my final peak, I would have almost reached level B, that is the power level of missiles. The damage caused is enough to be equivalent to a powerful humanoid mobile bomb. He carefully assessed the progress of his recovery. In 4 days, I just returned to a physical level similar to that of an average adult. When he was first selected as the core disciple of Bayun Martial Arts School, he already had a strength close to the letter E level, but lacked some actual combat experience. Level D is the level of a fighter, level E is the level of strength of Fei Bayun, senior sister Rosita and others. It is also enough to go out and open a martial arts school and recruit apprentices to teach skills. With the physical fitness of a normal adult, many moves in the God statue skill cannot be used, and only some basic fighting skills and grappling skills can be used. But coupled with his rich fighting experience and the secret method of energy and blood, Garen is confident to face any opponent below E level. In other words, those below E level are the strongest. After all, despite his poor health, he still has the consciousness of a peak warrior and the king of the century. It depends on what level the Silver Lantern Master's fighting method belongs to. Garen became more and more lurking and hiding, and even his breathing became longer and more subtle. With his rich fighting experience, he had already sensed something was wrong around him.